right now, like at this exact second, an algorithm is out there deciding whether someone can pay their mortgage.
Yeah, it's happening constantly.
And, lines of code are just filtering through thousands of resumes. They're isolating keywords, measuring tenures, and just making these mathematically cold calculations about human potential.
Which is terrifying when you really think about it.
Exactly. And the craziest part is you don't even know the name of this algorithm. You don't know what parameters it was trained on.
Right.
And if it rejects your life's work, I mean, you'll never know why. You're just left in the dark.
Yeah, welcome to the modern job hunt, right?
Seriously. It's this anxiety-inducing, opaque black box. For most of us, stepping into it just feels like, well, like firing your professional identity into an absolute void.
Oh, absolutely. And it is a fundamentally broken dynamic. I mean, you're asking candidates to submit highly sensitive personal data, professional data into systems that offer zero visibility in return.
Zero.
Right. You're basically throwing a message in a bottle into this massive ocean of automated tracking software.
Hoping someone finds it.
Hoping that a human recruiter, who is, by the way, likely drowning in 1,000 other identical bottles, just happens to pull yours out.
Yeah, the odds are just terrible.
They are. The entire process relies on chance, unseen variables, and honestly, just the unmeasured effort of exhausted HR departments.
Which is terrifying, right? Because we are talking about people's livelihoods here, your ability to literally pay your rent.
Exactly.
But today, our mission is to analyze a completely different architectural approach to this entire problem. So if you are currently navigating this mess, this deep dive is specifically for you.
Yeah, we're really unpacking the alternative today.
We are looking at a system called BAIR. That stands for Brehon AI Recruitment. And the documentation for this system claims to just completely dismantle the black box.
They really do go after the whole concept of opaque hiring.
Right. And we are going to look at this specifically from your perspective, the candidate's perspective.
Yeah.
We want to understand what it actually looks and feels like to step into an AI-governed hiring process that claims to be built on, well, radical transparency.
And strict legal compliance, which is huge here.
Right. So where do we even begin with this?
Well, the baseline premise we have to establish, just to understand any of this, is how the architects behind BI classify their own technology.
Okay.
In their foundational documentation, they officially categorize their recruitment AI as high risk.
Which is a really striking label, honestly.
Right.
Because, if you read tech press releases these days, companies usually run screaming from the term high risk.
Oh, totally. They hate that word.
Right. They want to call their AI like frictionless or lightweight or seamless, just to totally avoid regulatory scrutiny.
They absolutely do. I mean, the standard Silicon Valley playbook is to completely downplay the impact of the software so you don't get hit with legal liability.
Makes sense from their perspective, I guess.
Sure, but the BAIR documentation takes the exact opposite approach. They actually lean into the gravity of the process.
Really?
Yeah. They explicitly acknowledge that an algorithm assisting in the decision of who gets a job and who doesn't, well, that's a system that directly impacts human survival and economic stability.
Wow. That's pretty heavy for a software company to admit.
It is. But by starting from that premise, that the operation is inherently high risk, the whole architecture changes. Candidate safety, data privacy, reconstructible fairness, these become the bedrock of the code.
Instead of just like a patch they apply after some massive public relations disaster.
Exactly. It's built in from day one.
Okay, so if a system is built from the ground up to handle high-risk human data, how do you, the candidate, actually experience that? Because the first touch point you have with BAIR is visually and conceptually just really jarring.
Oh, it is definitely a pivot from what you're used to.
Yeah. I mean, you don't log into this sterile corporate portal with a generic blue logo and like a standard upload field.
Yeah, not at all.
Instead, you are introduced to this highly specific, carefully constructed persona. BAIR is represented by an actual broad-shouldered anthropomorphic brown bear.
Yep. A literal bear.
And according to the character Bible and the source material, he's dressed in a premium black athletic tracksuit or occasionally a tailored Navy executive suit if the context requires it.
Which is such a specific visual.
Right, with a little gold shield crest and everything. And he resides in this narrative digital environment called the Executive Lodge, which is set deep in the woods.
Yeah, and this lodge exists within a larger proprietary digital ecosystem they call Davidos.
Let's pause there for a second, actually, because Davidos is referenced constantly in this documentation. What exactly is that? I mean, is it just a fancy marketing name for a website?
No, it's a critical distinction. Davidos is described in the documentation as a closed-loop, verifiable operating environment.
Yeah, closed loop meaning what exactly?
Think of a standard corporate website as like a public square. Anyone can walk through, data is easily scraped, and the interactions are pretty superficial.
Right.
Davidos operates more like a secure, decentralized ledger. It's an environment designed specifically for compliance-heavy, governed transactions.
So it's basically Fort Knox for your job application.
Basically, yeah. When you enter that executive lodge, you're logging into a secure terminal where every single interaction is isolated and logged for audit purposes. The BAIR persona is really just the user interface, the visual front end, of that highly secure back-end environment.
But let me push back on that visual front end for a minute.
Yeah.
Because if I am, say, a senior executive or just a candidate who's just been laid off and I'm stressed out of my mind about finding work, interacting with a cartoon bear feels, I don't know, potentially patronizing.
I completely understand that reaction.
Or worse, it feels like this manipulative corporate tactic. Like they're using a cute mascot to disarm me so I drop my guard while their algorithm mines all my data.
Yeah.
How does the documentation justify this specific persona?
It's a really vital skepticism to hold, honestly, because if this were just a cheerful mascot trying to hype you up, it would absolutely be manipulative.
Right, like a cartoon paperclip tapping on the screen.
Yeah, exactly. But the documentation strictly dictates how this persona operates, and it relies heavily on UI and UX psychology. They call his core identity the steward of standards.
Steward of standards, okay.
And the guidelines explicitly forbid the bear from using exclamation points, corporate buzzwords, or desperate sales pitches. He is designed to under-emote.
Under-emote. That is a really fascinating phrase in an era where, every single app is trying to gamify our attention with confetti animations and loud noises.
Precisely. Just think about the traditional energy of corporate recruiting right now.
It's frantic.
It is. Recruiters are rushing, inboxes are overflowing, job descriptions are filled with these ridiculous words like rockstar and ninja.
Ugh, yes. We're looking for a coding ninja.
Right. It's a hyper-emotive, high-stress environment that induces total panic in the applicant.
Yeah, you feel like you have to scream just to be heard over the noise.
Exactly. So the bear in the Woodland Lodge is engineered to be the psychological antithesis of that. It represents an unhurried, deeply rooted presence.
So he's not trying to hype you up.
Not at all. When you log in, he doesn't blast you with pop-ups. He just asks a simple, declarative question. What brings you to the woods today?
Just really calm.
Very calm. And he presents two options. Be hired for you, the candidate, or hire for the employers. He invites the user to engage, but he never chases them.
Okay, so the argument here is that a calm interface actually regulates the nervous system of the applicant.
That is the exact psychological mechanism they're claiming, yes. If the system projecting authority is calm and methodical, it strips away that performative desperation that standard hiring processes kind of force upon candidates.
Oh, I see. So you don't feel like you have to use 100 buzzwords just to get his attention.
Right. You just have to present your data clearly. The environment commands a quiet respect for the process.
I understand the theory. I really do. But I'm still kind of stuck on the emotional reality of a job hunt. If I'm navigating a massive career crisis, I might actually want some human warmth. I might want a recruiter to tell me I have a great background, just to make me feel better.
Of course, that's natural.
So if this system deliberately under-emotes and is purely declarative, doesn't that create a profoundly cold, robotic experience for you as a candidate?
The source material addresses this exact tension. They describe the warmth in the BAIR system as real but rationed.
Real but rationed. Meaning what?
Well, they're actively arguing against the superficial, bubbling enthusiasm of a human recruiter who's really just trying to hit a monthly quota.
Because that warmth is kind of fake anyway.
Exactly. It's often a facade. Instead, BAIR models the interaction on the energy of a mentor or, like, a master craftsman.
Oh, interesting.
Think about a seasoned professor. They don't flatter you constantly, right? But their respect for your time and your effort is profound.
Yeah, you know where you stand with them.
Right. So the system's primary sign-off is simply, when you're ready, let's talk. It establishes a baseline of mutual professional dignity. They argue that honesty and clarity are ultimately much warmer and more respectful than false enthusiasm.
Real but rationed. Okay, I can actually see how superficial warmth can feel like a trap, especially when you're just waiting for a lowball offer anyway.
Right, it just builds false hope.
So the interface is calm, and the persona acts like a stoic mentor. But, an aesthetic of calm doesn't pay a candidate's rent.
No, it doesn't.
A quiet interface means nothing if my resume still goes into a black hole and I never hear back. How does this system actually solve the volume problem? Because that is the real root of candidate anxiety.
And that brings us to the core operational philosophy of the entire BAIR ecosystem, which they call their first axiom.
Okay, lay it on me.
The first axiom is effort does not scale, systems scale. And they pair this with what they term the final rule. Hope is not a strategy, effort is not leverage, busyness is not progress, infrastructure is value.
Let's really analyze that for a second. Effort does not scale. When we look at standard recruiting, candidates usually get ghosted because the human recruiter is relying entirely on effort.
Yes, human effort.
They're relying on their own memory, an inbox with like 4,000 unread emails, and just their sheer willpower to stay awake at 8 p.m. on a Friday to send rejection notices.
And human effort, no matter how well-intentioned it is, inevitably buckles under the sheer volume of a modern job posting. You just can't remember everything.
Yeah, human memory is a terrible foundation for a process that dictates people's careers.
It really is. The documentation argues that ghosting is not a failure of recruiter morality. It's not that recruiters are bad people.
Right.
It's a mathematical failure of infrastructure. BAIR's claims to replace fragile human effort with unyielding systems. In their architecture, a clear cadence of communication is guaranteed.
Guaranteed how?
Not because a recruiter is trying really hard to remember you, but because the software physically requires it. A dropped candidate, someone who never gets a response, represents a critical failure in the system's execution logic.
Oh, so it flags it as a bug.
Exactly. And BAIR's doctrine states it is ruthless with waste and relentless with standards.
The documentation actually details their internal weekly operating rhythm to prove this, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, their daily breakdown.
Right. Monday is construct. Tuesday is infrastructure. Wednesday is customer reality. Thursday is leverage. Friday is the war room.
It sounds intense.
It does. I read that, and it sounds like military supply chain jargon. How does something like Tuesday infrastructure actually translate to the experience of a candidate sitting on their couch, scrolling on their phone?
It translates into absolute predictability. Let's use a hypothetical candidate. We'll call her Sarah.
Okay, Sarah.
Say Sarah applies for a senior engineering role on a Sunday. In a traditional system, Sarah's application just sits in an inbox until a recruiter decides to do a resume sprint.
Which might be Tuesday, or it might be 3 weeks from now.
Exactly. You just don't know. But under BAIR's cadence, the system pulls the work forward based on that operational heartbeat.
Okay, so what happens on Friday?
The Friday war room means the internal team reviews the system's execution cues. For Sarah, this translates to a systemic guarantee. She will receive a definitive status update by the end of the week.
And again, not because a human remembered to email her.
Right, but because the Davidos environment flags any unaddressed application as an active system error that must be resolved before the week closes.
It's almost like an air traffic control center.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Yeah, like a passenger plane doesn't land safely at a major airport because the air traffic controller tried really hard that day.
Right, they aren't just relying on good vibes.
No.
Yeah.
It lands safely because there's an infallible system of radars, strict communication protocols, checklists, and automated alerts. The controller relies entirely on the system's infrastructure. So BAIR is basically claiming to build an air traffic control system for a candidate's career trajectory.
That is an incredibly accurate analogy. Heroics fail, systems endure. That's the whole philosophy. But to truly evaluate that claim, we have to look at the exact mechanics of their system.
Right, because theory is nice, but practice is what matters.
Exactly. If the infrastructure guarantees Sarah won't be forgotten, what exactly are the steps? Who or what is contacting her at each stage of the process?
Well, the workflow detailed in the source material for the BAIR track is broken down into 4 distinct phases. Those are intake, screen, decision, and audit.
4 clear steps.
Yeah. And governing this entire workflow is a very specific philosophy regarding technology. They state, AI is labor you manage, not software you license.
Which is a huge distinction.
It really is. They go on to say, let the machine remove drudgery so people do judgment.
Let's break down those 4 phases mechanically then. During the intake and screen phases, Sarah is interacting entirely with the system's infrastructure, the AI.
Okay, so no humans yet.
Right. When she submits her application, natural language processing algorithms ingest her unstructured data.
Because her resume is inherently messy.
Completely messy. People use different formats, weird phrasing, entirely different structures. The AI's job during the intake phase is to parse that unstructured text and map it onto a structured competency matrix required for the role.
So Sarah receives an automated touchpoint here.
Correct. Guided by that governed BAIR persona, she receives a clear, sparse notification acknowledging the intake, confirming that her data is being processed, and providing visibility into her place in the queue.
So there's absolutely no ambiguity. You know it was received.
Exactly.
Okay, but this is where my skepticism flares up again.
Bring it on.
If the AI is mapping her skills in the screening phase, what is stopping the AI from just making the final call? How do we know the AI isn't just silently rejecting people based on, like, an algorithmic hallucination?
And that is exactly why the third phase exists, decision. The BAIR doctrine mandates a human-in-the-loop, or HITL, for any execution gate that impacts human livelihood.
Okay, human in the loop. How does that actually work?
Mechanically, the software is built to remove the final approve or reject capability from the AI's permission stack entirely.
Wait, explain that mechanical removal. How does the software literally force human intervention?
Well, in the Davados environment, the AI can organize the data. It can flag gaps in a candidate's experience, and it can rank alignment with the job description. But when an application reaches the end of the screen phase, the system triggers a hard stop.
Like a physical barrier in the code.
Yes. It enters an execution gate. The AI physically cannot generate a rejection email or an offer letter. It doesn't have the authorization. It must route the competency matrix and all the evidence it collected to a human interface. A human being, a recruiter, or a hiring manager must review the AI's logic, evaluate the context, and manually click the execution command.
So the human is ultimately accountable for the final judgment.
The human is always accountable.
That significantly changes how a candidate should approach their application, honestly.
How so?
Well, if I know the first two phases are AI-driven, and the third is human-driven, I am essentially writing for two completely different audiences in sequence.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Right. For the AI intake, I need to optimize for sheer clarity. I need to drop the fancy formatting, the weird fonts, and all those vague euphemisms, and just clearly state my skills so the natural language processor can accurately map my data.
Make it easy for the machine to read.
Exactly. But because I know a human owns the decision phase, my portfolio and my eventual interview need to showcase human judgment, cultural nuance, and adaptability.
That is the exact strategic advantage this kind of transparency provides to you as the candidate. You are structuring your data for the machine's logic, and you are structuring your narrative for the human's judgment.
It's brilliant.
As their documentation notes, governance isn't the brake, it's the steering. The AI is subordinate to the human process. It does the heavy lifting, so the human has the cognitive bandwidth to actually evaluate Sarah's potential.
Rather than just skimming her resume for 6 seconds because they're totally exhausted.
Exactly.
But let's look at the dark side of AI screening. Let's talk about bias.
The biggest elephant in the room.
Yeah. Even if a human makes the final call, the human is relying on the data that the AI presents, right? If the AI's initial screening algorithm was trained on historical hiring data that happened to favor candidates from specific universities or specific demographics, it could quietly prioritize those candidates.
It happens all the time in standard AI models.
Right. It could silently perpetuate historical biases under the guise of mathematical efficiency. How does BAIR prove to a candidate that their screening is actually fair? Because just saying, "Trust us, we checked," isn't good enough anymore.
It absolutely isn't good enough, and the architects of BAIR know that. This is the exact reason they operate under that high-risk classification we talked about.
Right.
To combat the threat of silent algorithmic bias, they rely on the fourth phase of their workflow, audit. They operate under what they call the reconstruction principle.
The reconstruction principle.
Yeah. The doctrine states, nothing is trusted just because it happened. Everything is trusted because it is reconstructible.
Reconstructible, meaning there is a paper trail for everything.
A cryptographic trail, actually. This is governed by two internal mechanisms, ARIAS, which is their regulatory intelligence and audit engine, and the Divincia Plus, or DVA standard.
Okay, let's break those down, starting with the DVA standard, because that sounds highly technical. What does it actually do?
The DVA standard is essentially a cryptographic hashing protocol.
Meaning what in plain English?
When Sarah submits her application, when the AI maps her Python skills, when the execution gate halts, and when the human clicks reject or advance, every single microaction generates a unique time-stamped audit ID.
Oh, wow.
It creates an immutable ledger of the entire process. This is compiled into what the documentation calls an evidence pack.
So full transparency isn't just like a marketing buzzword for them. It's a mechanical reality of the system.
It's hard-coded.
Every decision leaves a digital fingerprint.
Precisely. If Sarah is advanced, there is a reconstructible trail proving exactly why. But more importantly, if Sarah is rejected, there is a reconstructible trail showing exactly the logic used to make that decision.
So they can't just hide behind vague feedback.
Nope. The human in the loop cannot just reject her based on a gut feeling without the system logging the justification against the original job requirements.
They refer to this in their internal literature as the clean hands power play.
Which is such a great term.
It is. The rule is that BAIR never argues, it never bluffs, and it never spins. It simply presents reality.
Just the facts.
Right. So if Sarah is rejected, she isn't going to get that infuriating boilerplate email that says, while your background is impressive, we have decided to move forward with candidates whose skills more closely align with our needs.
I think everyone listening just cringed hearing that sentence.
It's the worst, because that sentence is corporate doublespeak designed by lawyers to avoid liability while providing zero useful feedback to the candidate.
Under the BAIR framework, Sarah would receive the reality of her status, backed by the evidence pack.
What does that look like?
She would see that the system mapped her skills. The human reviewed the gap between her 5 years of experience and the required 8 years for the senior role, and the decision was explicitly made based on that tangible delta.
Think about how radical that is. The rage and frustration of the modern job hunt don't stem from being rejected. They stem from being rejected without understanding why.
Exactly. The confusion is what hurts.
Right. It comes from the suspicion that you never even had a fair shot to begin with. If every hiring decision had an auditable proof of process, it would fundamentally rebuild the shattered trust between employers and the labor market.
It really would.
It's the equivalent of implementing instant replay in professional sports.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, like for decades, a referee might make a bad call on the field, maybe due to a bad angle, or maybe due to an unconscious bias against a certain player, and the fans just had to live with the injustice.
You just had to accept it.
Right. But instant replay forces everyone to look at the exact undeniable evidence. The tape doesn't lie. BAIR is basically claiming to build instant replay functionality into career trajectories.
That's spot on. And that instant replay is exactly how Aerios, the audit engine we mentioned, roots out the bias you were concerned about.
How does Aerios use it?
Aerios constantly monitors those execution gates. If it detects statistical drift, for example, if the AI suddenly starts recommending rejection for 80% of candidates who graduated from a specific state university, Aerios flags that anomaly as an active system error.
Because it's seeing a pattern of bias.
Exactly. And because every step is hashed via the DVA standard, the engineers can literally roll the tape back. They find the exact node where the logic failed or exhibited bias, they halt the model, and they force human review.
Wow.
The bias cannot hide because the architecture is designed to constantly look for it.
Okay, and I have to ask this, if we are talking about creating a permanent, cryptographically hashed ledger of every single application, my alarm bells are ringing regarding privacy.
And they should be.
Because as a candidate, my resume contains my home address, my personal email, my phone number, and my entire employment history.
It's extremely sensitive data.
I do not want that highly sensitive data stored forever in some massive AI training set waiting to be hacked or sold to marketers. A fully auditable system sounds amazing for fairness, but it sounds like a surveillance nightmare.
That is a critical vulnerability in most standard AI systems. If an AI model trains on raw user data, it can accidentally memorize and later expose that personal information.
Exactly.
But the BAIR documentation claims to solve this through a strict mechanical process called data abstraction.
Data abstraction.
Yeah. They explicitly state that no PII, personally identifiable information, or raw candidate records are ever exposed to the broader intelligence engine.
How is that technically possible? If the AI needs to evaluate my resume, it physically has to read my resume.
It reads it, but it abstracts it before analyzing it.
Okay, I'm going to need an analogy for this one.
Sure. The system feeds concepts into the intelligence layer, never records. Let me offer a comparison. Imagine a highly competitive blind taste test for wine.
Okay.
The sommelier, the evaluator, needs to judge the flavor profile, the acidity, the tannins. But if they see the label on the bottle, they might be biased by the brand name or the region it came from.
So they blindfold the sommelier or they put the wine in a brown bag.
Exactly. Data abstraction works similarly. When Sarah's resume enters Davido's, the system immediately strips away the label.
So it takes off her name.
It removes her name, her contact details, the specific name of her high school, and any identifying markers. It isolates the functional flavor profile, the fact that she has 5 years of Python development, agile project management experience, and a certification in cloud architecture.
And that's all the AI sees.
Right. The AI evaluates the geometry of those isolated skills against the job matrix. It never actually knows it is evaluating Sarah. Her privacy is structurally isolated from the analytical model.
The blind taste test. I actually really like that metaphor because it explains how you can have intense, rigorous analysis without identity exposure.
It's a very elegant solution.
It is. But let's be realistic here. Building a secure, decentralized operating system, running cryptographic hashes on every candidate action, and building abstract data pipelines is incredibly expensive and resource-intensive.
Oh, it's a massive investment.
Most companies don't do this because they just don't have to. Why is BAIR going through all this trouble? Is the founder just an incredibly ethical person who wants to fix the world?
While the company may indeed have an ethical foundation, they are actually building this architecture in response to an incoming legal reality.
Ah, there it is, the law.
Yes, they are anchoring their entire ecosystem to the strictest international regulatory frameworks on the planet right now.
Which ones?
Specifically, the documentation aligns BAIR with the EU AI Act, the ISO 42001 standard for artificial intelligence management systems, and the NIST AI risk management framework from the United States.
Let's focus on the EU AI Act for a minute, because it is widely considered the most aggressive and comprehensive legislation in the world regarding artificial intelligence. What does it actually mandate?
The EU AI Act divides AI systems into tiers of risk. You have unacceptable risk, high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk.
And we talked earlier about high risk.
Right. Under this law, any AI system used in employment, worker management, and access to self-employment is explicitly legally categorized as Tier 2, high risk.
So it's not a choice.
It is not a suggestion. It is a legal mandate. If a company operates a high-risk system, they are subject to intense obligations before they can even put the software on the market.
Like what kind of obligations?
They must prove they have high-quality training data sets to prevent bias. They must maintain extensive logging of all activity. They must provide detailed documentation to authorities. And crucially, they must guarantee appropriate human oversight.
Which perfectly mirrors the exact workflow we just broke down. The DVA standard logging, the Areos bias checking, and the human-in-the-loop execution gates. BAIR's isn't just inventing a nice way to hire people. They are building a literal compliance engine.
They are practicing what they call governance for humans. In a lot of fast-moving tech startups, governance is viewed as a swear word.
Oh yeah, it's the Department of No.
Right, it's seen as red tape or a bottleneck. But BAIR views governance as the foundational management layer. They recognize that when you are building systems that dictate the economic reality of human beings, fairness, data provenance, and bias checking cannot just be optional features you patch in later.
They're totally weaponizing compliance.
Right.
Usually compliance sounds like a corporate shield to protect the company from getting sued.
Sure.
But BAIR is essentially using the heavy club of international law to smash the traditional black box of recruiting. And they are using those legal requirements to build an infrastructure that actively protects you, the applicant.
And we really should consider the global ripple effect of this strategy, because BAIR is standardizing its core architecture to comply with the EU AI Act, which is the strictest jurisdiction. It means that a candidate interacting with the system in a jurisdiction with very weak labor laws or no AI regulations at all still inherits that gold standard of protection.
That's huge.
It is. The system doesn't downgrade its ethical architecture just because local laws allow it. The baseline of universal dignity remains constant worldwide.
There is a line in their doctrine that I think perfectly synthesizes this entire philosophy. It reads, "Intelligence is the ingredient. Governance is the recipe. Trust is the meal."
It is a profound way to map the whole ecosystem.
It really is.
Think about the current state of global hiring. We have a massive overabundance of intelligence. Millions of resumes are floating around, massive job boards are scraping data, and algorithms are sorting it all.
Right, we have all the raw ingredients.
But traditional recruiting lacks a binding recipe. It lacks rigorous governance. And because there is no recipe, the resulting meal is chaotic, biased, and leaves everyone, employers and candidates alike, feeling totally frustrated and sick.
But in the BAIR model, Sarah's career data and her skills are the raw intelligence, the step-by-step workflow, the human in the loop, the data abstraction that is the governance,
Exactly.
and the end result. Sarah's absolute confidence that she received a fair, unbiased evaluation based purely on her merit, alongside the employer's confidence that they found the right person without violating international law. That is the trust.
And this brings us right back full circle to the psychological design of the governed bear persona we discussed at the very beginning.
Right, the bear in the tracksuit.
Yeah. We questioned whether a calm, austere persona was manipulative, but the mentorship posture, he assumes that unhurried, declarative energy is only possible and only authentic because he is backed by this immense infrastructure.
Right. Oh, I see.
He doesn't have to shout or use manipulative sales tactics to convince you he is fair. The undeniable, cryptographically auditable evidence running beneath him does the talking.
So when he says, "When you're ready, let's talk," he means it.
Yes. He is inviting you into a system that is mathematically and legally structured to protect your dignity.
It is a massive paradigm shift. If we step back and look at the entire journey of a candidate navigating this ecosystem, it is just a stark departure from the anxiety of the black box.
It's day and night.
You don't fire your resume into the void anymore. You enter the secure environment of Davidos, guided by an interface that deliberately lowers your cognitive load and actually values your time.
You experience a systemic cadence that refuses to rely on human memory. You know exactly what phase you are in: intake, screen, decision, or audit.
And you understand that natural language processing is evaluating your abstracted skills to eliminate bias.
While an accountable human being holds the final execution power over your career outcome, and you know that every single step is logged, verifiable, and legally compliant.
We spend so much of our energy in the modern job hunt trying to game a broken, opaque system. We agonize over guessing the right keywords to bypass an unseen filter. We try to flatter exhausted recruiters. And we silently worry about whether an unconscious bias will disqualify us before we even get an interview.
It's exhausting.
It is. We expend massive amounts of cognitive bandwidth just navigating the chaos of the process itself rather than focusing on our actual capabilities.
Which leads to a final, somewhat provocative thought to ponder regarding systems like this.
Leave us with it.
If you know you are entering an environment that actively strips away the bias, eliminates the human error of ghosting, and evaluates your skills purely on reconstructible, auditable evidence, how does that change the way you prepare?
Oh.
In a perfectly fair system, the excuses fall away. The anxiety of the unknown is removed, leaving only the undeniable objective quality of your own work. The question candidates have to ask themselves is, are you truly ready for an environment where effort doesn't scale, but your actual talent does?
That is the ultimate test, isn't it? When the noise, the bias, and the chaos are finally stripped away, you are just left with the reality of your own capabilities. There's nowhere to hide, but there is also a profound freedom in that clarity. Build your assets, refine your skills, and trust the systems that respect your data. See you next time on The Deep Dive.